Crime, Wine, and Chaos contains adult language and graphic content. Listener discretion is advised.
Keep calm and carry on, Chaos Kids. I'm Naomi.
I'm Amber, and this is Crime, Wine, and Chaos. Not calm.
Not calm.
Not calm. God.
Trying.
It's all right. That's all right.
I was just telling Amber before we started, I feel like an airhead, and that is a weird feeling for me because I'm not an airhead.
No.
But sometimes I sit in front of this microphone with my sister, and it's like there's nothing in my brain. Like there's nothing there. It's just air. Hi. How are you?
Oh my gosh. I guess I'm doing okay.
You're doing better than I am, I think. You're tired, but at least you have thoughts in your brain.
Yeah. I'm using that term loosely. Thoughts. Oh my gosh. Air quotes. Yeah. What's new? What's with the airheadness?
I don't know. We're just going to blame it on perimenopause. We just blame anything we can't explain that doesn't make sense, that makes us look bad on perimenopause.
Perfect. Okay. That sounds good.
Okay. That's the rule moving forward. Anyone who goes through menopause. I wasn't going to say ladies because,
whatever.
Other people go through menopause too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh man, that is timely. I just went to the doctor today to talk about my perimenopause symptoms.
It's like I'm with. I knew it in my spirit. I knew it. Yeah. What did the doctor say? Any good news there, or is it all just downhill from here?
She was like, "You're a mess."
Is that your professional diagnosis as a doctor? Because I pretty much already figured that out on my own without the doctorate. So
I know. No, she's sweet. She's like, "Oh man, that's a lot. I'm just gonna go get some labs done and see what's going on."
Okay. All right.
All I can do.
It's all you can do.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Also, I'm doing my second round of detox. So
you're doing it again?
Yeah.
How's it going? When did you start? Tell me everything.
I started yesterday. It's going fine.
Better than last time?
Way better, because I never went back to caffeine, sugar, or dairy.
You didn't? Oh my goodness, sister, I didn't know. Yeah. I'm so proud of you. That's incredible.
Thank you. I did go back to gluten because let's be real.
Yeah, 100% bread.
But yeah.
What are you gonna? Yeah. What else are you gonna say? All you have to say is bread. I got you.
Yeah. So I think it'll be a bit easier this time. So I have water today.
No major, unexpected, debilitating headaches from caffeine withdrawals.
No, I mean, I have FOMO of other people that are eating things that look fun, but
Sure. That's okay. But you also have a better sense of what could be fun this time around because you've done this before. You're like a pro now. Mm-hmm. You're a pro at this detox.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you're not drinking anything besides water, but we do have some new Chaos Kids Club members.
Yes, we do.
2 very special people.
Mm-hmm.
One is
Christina,
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Christina. Knew it started with a K. This is my airheadedness. What do you want from me? Welcome. That's so amazing. Yay. She is a mutual of mine on TikTok.
Awesome.
And then Tarek.
Yes, Tarek.
Who is also a mutual of mine on TikTok, both of which wanted to be supportive of the podcast.
Thank you. Welcome.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Just the most beautiful people.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you. And we appreciate all the Chaos Kids that listen to us, even if they can't join the club.
That's right.
We are appreciative of everyone who supports us in any way that they support us. So thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Sister, do you have a crime for me today?
This one's bad.
I knew you would.
This one's bad. Hopefully nothing will stick in your brain since it's just air in there. And then
that's
immediately.
There's the upside. Mm-hmm. There's the silver lining.
Yeah, this won't traumatize you because you won't retain
one ear in one ear and out the other.
Just move through like a gust of wind.
Yes. Perfect.
Okay. Well, major trigger warning for child abuse and death of a child.
Okay, great.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you about Anthony Avalos, little
Okay.
pumpkin. So first we're going to talk about Crystal, Heather, and David. They are siblings. Crystal is the oldest, and then David 2 years younger, and then Heather about 1.5 years younger than David.
Okay.
Sounds very much like the age gaps in our three siblingness.
Close.
Close,
Pretty close.
but that's the totality of the similarities. That's it.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So David and Crystal were super close. They had the same friend group, listened to the same music, but Heather, the youngest, was always a bit different.
Okay.
She never really clicked with her older siblings. And David says that Heather put on different personalities as a kid depending on who was around. Mm-hmm.
That's a coping mechanism.
Yeah. Their stepdad was super fucking into physical punishment. So Heather would tell her parents that David and Crystal were doing things that they weren't actually doing so that they would get beat.
Oh.
Because she seemed to enjoy watching this happen.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. Crystal even talks of a time when Heather wanted to play a video game with Crystal and her friends. And when Crystal didn't let her play, she went and got a knife from the kitchen and chased Crystal and her friends around the house with it, saying that she was going to kill them. That escalated quickly. Mm-hmm.
I mean, look, we fought as kids. There was some physical violence involved, but I don't believe, except for the time that Marissa smacked me over the back with a phone, I'm pretty sure there were no actual weapons involved.
No, I remember the phone thing though.
That was bad.
It was.
There was literally like the imprint of like the numbers on my back, where
Yeah,
like the buttons for the
yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So they're being chased with a knife. They get into.
Okay. So they're being chased with a knife. Holy shit.
I mean, it's bad.
You know, sometimes the sentences that come out of our mouths, I just.
Oh, I know.
We're all here by choice. Everyone consents. Keep going.
Okay. So they managed to get into the bathroom and lock the door. And Heather is like waving the knife under the door and screaming at them.
Holy shit.
Also, can you imagine being like a teenager or whatever and your friends are over? How embarrassing.
Can you imagine being the friend?
That's what I'm saying. Like, what's going on at your house? I gotta go.
Yes.
So embarrassing for Crystal. Like, thanks for coming. Hope you come again. I don't think so. Bye. My God.
Oh my God. Around what period of time is this? Is this the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s?
This is the early 2000s.
Okay.
So later that night, Crystal and David both got beaten with a belt for allowing Heather to play with a knife.
Okay.
So Crystal had a child at the age of 16 and moved out of the house with her partner.
Okay.
Because she was like, fuck this place, right?
Mm-hmm.
So once Crystal moved out, her and Heather started writing each other letters. And it seemed like they were finally bonding. And Heather had matured, and Crystal was really hopeful that they would have a close sister relationship like she wanted.
Okay.
In 2006, Heather was 16 and had a new boyfriend when she got pregnant. So Crystal was really supportive of Heather as she had gone through exactly the same thing. And she was there for her throughout the whole pregnancy, right?
Sure.
And on May 4th, 2006, Heather gave birth to baby Anthony.
Okay.
Anthony was beautiful and happy, and he seemed to really bring the whole family even closer together.
Unlike the first grandbaby that was born.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So David says that he still had this nagging feeling or fear that, you know, he didn't quite trust Heather and he was a little bit nervous about Anthony. But he did have to give Heather some credit because she was starting to mature into a decent person.
Okay.
So not too long after Anthony was born, Heather, her partner, and Anthony moved in with David and his wife. It was when they moved in that David first started to notice that Heather wasn't actually caring for Anthony properly.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Her partner was doing all of the work, and when Anthony cried, Heather would just ignore him.
Oh.
I know. And Heather and her partner argued constantly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So finally, Heather tells her partner that she doesn't want him in her life anymore. She doesn't want him in Anthony's life. And if he even comes around, she will call the police and tell them that he is an illegal immigrant and she will have him deported.
Oh my God.
Heather fucking sucks.
Oh my God. That is just some.
Yeah.
People aren't illegal. I'm just gonna take a moment to say that out loud in case anyone. People aren't illegal. That's not a thing.
Not a thing.
But, okay. Borders are violence. Keep going.
So the argument ended with Heather punching her partner in the mouth before he left.
Nice.
And as he's leaving, he asked David and his wife to please make sure that Anthony is taken care of.
Oh my God.
Mm-hmm. I know. So David and Anthony were extremely close, and David sort of took on the role of father figure for him.
Mm-hmm.
But after a year of living with David and his wife, Heather and Anthony moved out.
So did David and his wife not have kids of their own yet?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, Heather bounced from relationship to relationship.
Mm-hmm.
She went on to have 3 more children, all with different fathers.
Mm-hmm.
She had a very short fuse and lost her patience with her kids really quickly. And she was also super into corporal punishment on her kids.
Super into it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I mean, look how she was raised.
I know. On one occasion, she was at Crystal's house with Anthony, and Anthony was being rambunctious. So Heather hit him with the vacuum hose.
What?
Uh-huh. And when Crystal confronted Heather, Heather told her that she will parent her kids the way she sees fit and that Crystal basically needs to mind her own business. Yeah.
I mean, anyone who's been listening for any period of time to this show knows how you feel about this. Like,
mm-hmm. It makes my blood boil.
I know.
Mm-hmm. If you hit an adult with a vacuum hose, you would go to jail.
That's right.
Yeah. So Crystal went on to make several calls to CPS, but nothing ever came of it. There's footage too of, I don't know if it's law enforcement or CPS coming to her door, like body cam footage. And she's so like, she's so good at putting on a show. Like, oh, kids will be kids, these silly guys. Like she's fucking Mother Teresa,
If that's the extent of any kind of inquiry into abuse, then no wonder so many kids get dropped in the system, like through the cracks or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
Like it's that whole thing of like judging people based on how they respond to things, right? Like, oh, they didn't have a proper grief response. It's also like, so you investigated this house, but you just talked to the person who was being accused of being abusive and they,
seemed really nice.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Nothing was out of the ordinary, Amber.
Yeah. God
right?
damn it. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So she also always had an explanation for the injuries on her kids. She would say that it was just siblings roughhousing and fighting. During this time, she assumed it was one of the kids' fathers that was making the calls to CPS. She never knew that it was Crystal.
Oh.
Yeah. And Crystal wanted to make sure that it stayed that way because she knew that if Heather found out, she would cut her out and she wouldn't be able to keep an eye.
To keep an eye on the kids,
Yeah, totally. So one day, David has a football party at his house and he invites Heather. And also at the party was a guy named Kareem, who David had met at a previous job.
Okay.
Sister Crystal was also at this party, and she remembers meeting Kareem and getting a really bad vibe from him. Mm-hmm. She says that she turned to Heather and said, "Don't even think about it."
And like, look, let's be real, right? Because there's levels to that. It's like, okay, that one's trouble, but I might take him for a spin for a minute, but I'm not going to like
for a spin.
Get into a relationship. You know what I mean?
He's not coming to family dinner, but I can.
Right.
I can.
Yes.
Hang for
There's layers to this. There's levels. There's tiers. You know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Totally. Totally. But of course, within 2 months, Kareem and Heather were dating, and Kareem had moved into Heather's apartment.
Okay, that's what I'm saying. See, that's not the tier. That's not the tier for Kareem. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No. He's a tier 1 candidate, and that's it.
That's it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't think Heather has tiers, though.
Right. It's either yes or no. It's either on or off. It's either we're right. 100%. I know a lot of people that operate that way, or I have known. You know what I mean? Like,
for sure.
A lot of people do that shit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So Heather and Kareem went on to have 3 children together. So,
oh my gosh! So now she has 7 kids. Wow.
Mm-hmm. 7. So David has Anthony over to his house one day and noticed that he had scratches and bruises on him. But when he asked Anthony where he got his injuries, he always said that it was from playing sports or roughhousing with his brothers.
That sounds kind of rehearsed, huh?
Mm-hmm. Well, also, David could clearly see an adult-sized handprint on Anthony's thigh.
Right.
Oh.
How old is Anthony by now at this point?
I want to say like,
Ish?
Hold on. I'm not sure. Maybe like 6 or 7.
And he's already got 6 brothers and sisters?
Maybe I think I get to it later. I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'm just trying to get a timeline on this stuff. That's all.
I'm sorry.
I'm trying to figure out, because he's the person we're talking about. I'm trying to figure out like his, anyway.
Oh, he's the person we're talking about. There should be more details. Don't shame me.
I'm not. I'm just like,
Don't shame me, airhead.
I'm sorry. What were we talking about?
Exactly. You won't. If I tell you his age, you won't remember anyway.
I won't even remember. It's fine.
Mm-hmm. In another instance, David and his wife, Maria, had all of the kids over, and they were all watching a movie together. And Anthony's brother kept getting up to use the bathroom. And after he did this several times, David got concerned. So he went to the bathroom to check on him, and he found him eating a banana peel in the bathroom.
What?
Like he ate the whole banana, like the peel and all.
Okay.
And when David asked him what he was doing, he said that he was hungry.
Oh, no.
No. He then went on to tell David that he hadn't eaten since yesterday, and all they had yesterday was a frozen burrito that was still frozen. That's what Kareem had given them to eat.
One burrito between the 7 of them?
I don't know if they each got a burrito, but either way, it was still frozen, which is gross.
What?
Yeah.
So David promptly fed all the children.
Mm-hmm. And he tells all of them that they can talk to him and let him know what's going on. And slowly they start opening up about the abuse in the home.
Oh, no.
I know. So David decided to call his sister Crystal to come over to help. And when David and Crystal sit down with the kids and talk, they learn that things are much worse than they thought. Okay, all the trigger warnings.
Okay.
Kareem would grab the boys by their ears and twist them. I know. He would throw things at them. And he would make them physically fight each other as punishment.
Oh, my God.
And it was common practice for all of the kids to take food out of the trash when their parents weren't looking so that they could get something to eat.
Oh, my God.
That is heartbreaking. So David and Crystal decide they are going to call the police, which they knew was a huge risk because if nothing was done, they would, lose access to the kids.
Yeah.
They decided that when Heather showed up to get the kids, they would call. This is so confrontational. Like, it's making me uncomfortable.
I'm uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
This is... Okay.
So Heather shows up to pick up her kids. She asks them where they are, and David tells her, your kids are not going with you. So she loses her shit and tries to push her way into David's house. And so he calls 911, and a sheriff arrives to talk to Heather and the kids. After interviewing the kids, the officer decides not to release them to Heather, and Heather finally agrees to allow the kids to stay with David. Yeah. The kids are jumping up and down when they find out that they get to stay at Uncle David's. I know, these little pumpkins. So shortly after, Heather was granted an unsupervised visit with the kids.
Oh, no.
Mm-hmm. At this visit, Heather tells the kids that Kareem wasn't going to be around anymore and that their lives were going to be different. But in order to have this, the kids had to tell the police that they made up the abuse claims. So the kids did.
Oh, no.
I know. Why an unsupervised visit?
I don't know.
I know. So when David found out that the kids would be going back into Heather's custody, he begged them not to do it like the authorities and told them that if they did, it was only a matter of time before one of the kids was dead. But Heather regained custody anyway and immediately cut David and Crystal out of her life.
Yep.
In my defense, I started watching this episode of Evil Lives Here, and I actually did this story a long time ago and put it in the no thank you pile because it was too much.
And then you decided it wasn't?
Well, and then we got through spooky season and did all that, and now we're back. Okay. So 3 years later, a 911 call comes in from Heather, and she is saying that her son isn't breathing. She tells the dispatcher that he hit his head the day before, and she thought he was fine, but now he seems kind of out of it. When the first responders arrived, they said that Anthony looked like a zombie and that he was likely laying there for 3 days before 911 was called. So Anthony is taken to the hospital, and that is when David and Crystal get a call saying that Anthony was on life support. When David's wife, Maria, got to the hospital, she didn't even recognize Anthony. She said he was so thin that all of his ribs were showing. His eyes were sunken in and dark. He had cigarette burns on his chest. His eyelashes were gone, which was later learned to be caused by Heather rubbing hot sauce in his eyes. And the nurses at the hospital said it was the worst child abuse case they had ever seen.
God damn it, sister.
I'm sorry. I'm never doing a child death again. I am sorry. On June 21st, 2018, Anthony was taken off of life support, and 30 minutes later, he passed away. He was only 10 years old. Little peanut. Heather and Kareem were both arrested and charged with murder and torture. And of course, they both continue to deny any abuse allegations. Heather and Kareem were both found guilty of child abuse, torture, and first-degree murder. They were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Oh, my God.
What do you think is wrong with Heather? Do you think, as a child, she seemed like maybe she was a sociopath or something.
I mean, who even knows anymore? You know,
Mm-hmm.
It's never just one thing.
Yeah, and there's something about this fucking piece of shit guy who was just mom's boyfriend that makes it so much worse. Like, who the fuck are you?
Well, they had 3 kids together.
I know. But it's like, why? I don't know.
I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't have answers. There's no answers here.
No, there aren't any answers. I'm really sorry. I won't ever do a child one again. Not interested.
Not like that. Jesus.
I'm sorry. That sweet little towhead pumpkin with the paint on him and the train tracks.
I know.
That one traumatized me.
I'm sorry, sister. I'm not saying never. I'm just saying, I did not see that coming. I was not prepared for that.
Okay. My apologies.
No, this is what we signed up for. Okay, my chaos story is slightly less awful than this?
I was just going to ask if you had a palate cleanser. Like if vinegar were a palate cleanser.
Kinda, yeah.
Okay.
Right. I mean, yes, it'll cleanse the palate, but like not in a pleasant, like sorbet.
It'll
kind of
leave
way,
a bad
you
taste
know?
in your mouth. Yeah, that's nice. That's what I'm looking for.
I'm going to tell you, and you're going to figure out at some point before I get to the meat of it, you're going to figure out what the story is.
Okay.
But you're probably not going to know at first.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to tell you about Lindy Chamberlain-Creighton.
Okay.
Okay. I think that's how you say it. It's hyphenated. Creighton.
That sounds right.
So I think it's Creighton. It could be Creighton. I'm not 100% certain. I didn't go check.
I before E,
Sorry.
you know.
Right.
Mhm.
Alice Lynn Murchison was born March 4th, 1948 to parents Avis and Cliff Murchison. Her family called her Lindy from a very young age. At the time of her birth, the Murchison family lived in Wakatani on the North Island of New Zealand. Before Lindy turned 2, Cliff moved the family to the state of Victoria, Australia. The family moved often as Cliff moved from pastor of one church to the next, almost yearly.
Hmm.
It was in the small city of Benalla that Lindy graduated from high school. She worked as a waitress, as a shop assistant, and a clerk. And later she worked as a receptionist and then a bookkeeper. In 1969, Lindy met and married Michael Chamberlain, who was also from New Zealand. He was also a member of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and he was also a pastor, just like her dad.
Mhm.
Shortly after their wedding in November, the two moved to Tasmania, which is a large island off the southeastern coast of Australia. They lived there for 5 years while Michael was pastor at multiple churches there. In October of 1973, their first son, Aidan, was born.
I like that name.
Mm-hmm. During this period, Lindy attended a technical college and received a certificate in dressmaking, tailoring, and drafting.
Ooh.
A year later, the family moved to northern Queensland, Australia, which is a state. Queensland is a state.
Mhm.
It's the northeastern state. And their next son, Reagan, was born in 1976. Lindy started making some money by specializing in making custom wedding dresses.
Cool.
They moved around a bit over the next few years within northern Queensland, landing in Mount Isa, where their third child, Azaria, was born in June of 1980.
These are great names.
Mhm.
Reagan, Aiden, and Azaria.
Mhm.
God.
So a little over 2 months later, in August of 1980, Azaria is 9 weeks old. The Chamberlain family went camping at Ayers Rock. It's also known as Uluru
Nailed it.
by the Aboriginals of Australia. And it is one of the most sacred sites on the continent for the Aboriginal people.
Cool.
This sits smack dab in the middle of Australia, like right in the center of the continent. Uluru is a huge sandstone monolith in what is referred to as the Northern Territory's Red Center. It's very like it's like very Australia.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like dry, hot, this orangey, reddish sandstone, like giant outcropping, right? I mean, it's huge. It's fucking huge. I'll include a picture in the show notes of the actual Uluru, right?
Mhm.
The nearest town is over 200 miles away, and this national park is a full 16 plus hour drive from Mount Isa, where the Chamberlains were living at the time. This is a big adventure they're going on.
Mhm.
The Chamberlains arrived late on the night of August 16th at the Ayers Rock campground. The next morning, Michael and the two boys climbed portions of the rock. Lindy carried Azaria while she explored a formation called Fertility Cave. Just outside the cave, she looked up to see a dingo staring at her. She would later tell a detective that she had the feeling that that wild dog was casing the baby.
Oh, okay. Uh-huh. The dingo ate your baby.
After sunset, the Chamberlain family gathered with other campers around the barbecues near their tent site. Lindy held Azaria in her arms as she and Michael chatted with Greg and Sally Lowe, another young couple also vacationing with an infant. Around 8 o'clock, as Sally walked to a garbage can to throw away some items left from the evening meal, she turned to see a dingo following 4 or 5 paces behind her.
Do you know, are dingoes known to be dangerous?
I'll talk about
Oh,
dingoes.
okay, great.
Minutes later, Michael entertained his son Aiden by tossing a crust of bread to a dingo
Ooh.
that appeared near their barbecue bench, and Lindy scolded him, "You shouldn't encourage them." And about the same time as the dingo pounced on a mouse that Aiden had been chasing. Lindy announced, "It's time I put Bubby down," and left with the baby for the tent to put Azaria to bed.
Okay.
About 10 minutes later, having left Azaria in the tent with Reagan, who was already asleep, Lindy rejoined the rest of the campers by the barbecue bench. And then the cry of a baby was heard coming from the direction of the Chamberlain's tent. So Lindy ran over there, and then the campers heard her cry, my God, the dingo's got my baby."
Oh, shit.
I just gave myself chills.
Yeah.
So what is a dingo?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it is an ancient lineage of dog found only in Australia, although its scientific variety remains contested. If you ask the Aboriginals, they would call them a revered and sacred animal. Aboriginal groups across the continent have had relationships with the dingoes that included hunting and protection, but they never domesticated the dingoes. Many in North America would see them as something very akin to a coyote,
Okay.
which they are often compared to. They're about the same size as a coyote, so medium.
Mm-hmm.
They are considered a feral dog because their lineage goes back to a domestic breed, but the earliest known remains of dingoes are 3,500 years old. So, in fact, some would say they represent an early form of dog.
Oh.
Compared with the dog, the dingo is able to rotate its wrists and can turn doorknobs or raise latches in order to escape confinement.
Oh, no.
Dingo's shoulder joints are unusually flexible, and they can climb fences, cliffs, trees, and rocks. These adaptations help dingoes climbing in difficult terrain where they prefer higher vantage points.
Mm-hmm.
Wolves do not have this ability.
Yeah, I need to look at a dingo picture right now.
And while the prey of dingo is wide and varied, 20% of the mammals they eat could be regarded as large, including kangaroos and cattle.
Shit. Cattle? That's huge.
Yeah.
Okay.
I imagine, especially with the larger ones, they take them down as a pack, like lots of pack predators do, right?
Okay, so years ago, when Jade was first born and her dad and I were living in that apartment, that used to be behind Frosty's when Frosty was still there,
Mm-hmm.
the lady that lived just up the hill had this cute dog, and she said it was part dingo.
I mean, that's like people saying they have a dog that's part wolf, right? Because you can breed them, and some people do keep domestic dingoes.
Okay.
I mean, it would be like having a fox or something.
It was so cute with these giant ears and just kind of...
Oh, yeah. I mean, dingoes, I think you looked them up. They're actually really beautiful looking animals.
Yeah.
They're not like a hyena. They're not like,
Yeah,
you know,
like, wow,
it's
fuck. Yeah.
like- no, they're like really pretty dogs,
Mhm.
but they are feral
Yeah.
dogs.
Yeah.
They're dogs.
Yep. Scary.
I actually, just to say this, my friend Amy down in Sydney, we were having a whole other conversation, and then I like interjected today, and I was like, just completely unrelated. I'm working on a story for the podcast, and I'm going to tell Amber about Lindy Chamberlain. And she was like, oh my God, and nobody understands how dangerous fucking dingoes are.
Oh,
And I'm
really?
like,
So more so
Mhm.
than coyotes?
I think maybe, yeah.
Okay.
But coyotes are dangerous, because I told her, I was like, shit, no kidding. I've always considered that like dingoes were kind of like a coyote. And I remember specifically when I was in elementary school, there was a time when a coyote was seen running around on like the baseball field out on the
Mhm.
playground area. And we didn't get to go to recess because they didn't want the kids out where the coyote was.
Mhm.
Like, they're dangerous enough that they're not going to let us just go to recess while there's a coyote roaming the
For
grounds.
sure. I was just asking because too, it sounds like they're throwing bread at the dingo and all the things. Most coyotes, when they see a human, they're going to take off. They're not going to be
Right.
like really brazen like that. I'm wondering if
Well, I mean, we'll get into
Okay.
it a little bit more, but I will say that like this area is like a campground and this is like a tourist spot.
Mhm.
And there's like a ton of like, there's a huge like dingo population there.
Yeah. Oh God.
So this is that thing of like, it's not any different than going at this point, you know, you got to think about it like this. It's like people who are dumb enough to like feed bears at the campsite
Yeah.
because they're so adorable. Look at their ears, but the bear will rip your face off.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Totally just got a picture of the great outdoors. Oh boy. Okay. Oh boy. With the candy bar. Getting back in the car.
So,
Yeah.
Frank Morris was the first investigator to arrive, and he shined a light across the floor of the Chamberlain tent where he noticed blood on one of the rugs. Paw prints led away from the tent entrance, but faded as they hit a road. Meanwhile, Aiden was crying to Sally, and he showed her the empty bassinet and said, "The dingo has our bubby in its tummy."
Oh no.
Soon, campers were locating flashlights and heading out into the dark scrubland. Nearly 300 men, women, and teenagers formed a human chain to look for tracks or pieces of clothing. Michael, Lindy's husband, who did not join the chain, had already assumed the worst, telling a fellow camper she's probably dead now. Then he added, for no particular reason, "I am a minister of the gospel."
Okay, Michael. What? Wow. There's a lot to unpack there. He's not even going to try. She's already dead.
I guess.
Okay.
So the main search turned up dingo tracks, but nothing more. Away from the chain, one tourist, Murray Hobby, had better luck following the tracks of a large dingo under a sand ridge. Hobby noticed a depression in the sand where the wild dog seemed to have laid something down it had been carrying. And so he called over this ranger, Derek Hoff, and a native tracker, Nue Mignantini, who studied the depression, and the imprint in the sand suggested a knitted weave of some sort, like a blanket or a sweater or something.
Mhm.
The men looked for dingo tracks leading on from the depression, but they were unable to track the dingo any further than that.
Mhm.
Soon, a team of investigators is assigned to this case, and they are not all on board with the dingo explanation. Well, one of them is. He points out to the rest that there had been a series of recent dingo attacks in the park on children. In fact, for the 2 years before Azaria went missing, Uluru Chief Ranger Derek Hoff had been writing to the government urging a dingo cull and warning of imminent human tragedy. Roth noted that dingoes in the area were becoming increasingly aggressive, approaching and sometimes biting people.
Yikes.
But then one of the other detectives was like, no way, not possible. A dog could not lug a 10-pound baby in its mouth for over 100 yards, and then goes and fills a bucket with 10 pounds of sand in it and was only able to hold it in his mouth for less than a minute. And then he challenged the rest of them
He's
to give
not
it
a
a try.
fucking dog. A dog absolutely can do that. What an idiot. Does he think he's a dingo? What's going on?
Does he think he's a dingo?
God.
So a week later, Wally Goodwin set out for a gully at the base of Uluru with plans to photograph wildflowers along the way. While walking along a densely foliated animal path, Goodwin spotted shredded clothes resting near a boulder. Upon closer inspection, they proved to be a torn diaper. They call it a nappy in Australia. And I think in the UK, they call them nappies.
I know. I love it. Mhm.
And a jumpsuit. Goodwin reported his discovery, and Constable Morris arrived to collect the evidence. Missing in this discovery was the matinee jacket Lindy said the baby was wearing, a jacket the police would later say never existed.
Because they know.
Uh-huh.
Is this the same officer that carried a bucket in his mouth? Because I'm
Yes,
going to be...
nothing was out of the ordinary.
Yeah, well, I'm going to have lots of questions about whatever he says.
And just to explain, a matinee jacket is basically a small little jacket for babies that's kind of like a cardigan.
Okay.
Basically,
Cute.
right? So then August 28th, Detective Sergeant Charlwood took over the Chamberlain investigation. And while his team checked vehicle registrations of August 17th campground visitors, Charlwood would mull over the initial report on the case, which included suspicious tidbits of information.
Okay.
It was reported that when Lindy had brought Azaria in for a medical checkup, the baby was dressed in all black. The examining doctor is said to have been curious enough about the name Azaria to look it up in a dictionary of names and discover that it meant, quote, sacrifice in the wilderness.
Are we satanic panicking this shit?
A little bit. Actually, it means whom God aids. That's what Azaria means, whom God aids.
Well, she aids Michael because he is the man of gospel.
That's right. The initial detective also commented in this report that Azaria's clothes were found close to where the family hiked earlier in the day and noted that the people who observed her that evening, quote, assumed she was holding a baby when they had seen her holding a white bundle to her breast.
Okay. This just keeps getting dumber and dumber.
This is why, when you get done with the story, this is why you're going to really understand why, like, making a joke about the dingo eating your baby is actually not even funny.
I'm sorry that I did that at the beginning.
No, this is why this story needs to be told.
Yeah.
It was a Seinfeld episode that did this.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many reasons not to like Seinfeld. Anyway, in places around Australia, ranging from laboratories to wildlife parks, investigators conducted experiments to test the veracity of Lindy's account of Azaria's disappearance. Blood, vegetation, and hair samples found on Azaria's clothing were examined. Dead dingoes shot in the Uluru region following the disappearance were dissected by veterinarians looking for either human bone or human protein. Tears in the fibers of Azaria's clothing were studied. Did the tears appear to be caused by dingo's teeth or by some human instrument? Mm-hmm. At Cleland Park Wildlife Reserve in Adelaide, dingoes were tossed meat wrapped in a baby's diaper or a nappy so that the diaper could be studied and compared to Azaria's.
Okay.
From these various efforts, investigators began to build a case for murder.
Are you fucking kidding me? Also, I'm just picturing like a T-bone with a diaper on, just being launched through the air. Like, what? This is our scientific investigation? What the fuck? Oh my God. So stupid.
Stop it. I'm dying. Okay.
Oh boy.
Oh my God. Okay.
That's awesome. Oh, sister. Oh, shit.
God damn it.
Sorry.
No, it's good. This is the roller coaster ride of this episode. No, I'm crying from laughing too hard. Okay. Newspapers fueled suspicions that the Chamberlains killed their baby, possibly as a religious sacrifice. Stories reported rumors that the Chamberlains were somehow linked to the Jonestown Massacre suicide 2 years earlier. Or that Azaria might have been killed to atone for sins of the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
What?
Reporters frequently observed that many Australians concluded from televised interviews with the Chamberlains that the couple's demeanor didn't match what they would expect from a couple that had just tragically lost a child.
I hate that. Who's now also being investigated.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
On October 1st, 1980 in Mount Isa, Charlwood conducted a several-hour-long interview with both Lindy and Michael separately. In his questions, he took Lindy along the timeline from the time they left their house to go camping to the days following Azaria's disappearance. The interview was relatively cordial, but Lindy expressed repeated frustration with leaks to the press of forensic tests that seemed to cast doubt on her account of events.
Mm-hmm.
Charlwood took particular interest in Lindy's unusual reaction to his suggestion that she be hypnotized in an effort to pull out additional details concerning her sighting of the dingo. Lindy immediately rejected the idea, saying, quote, "The church wouldn't allow it and I wouldn't do it. God slew Saul for that. Do you know Saul and the Witch of Endor?"
I mean, I don't.
I don't
Okay. thought you were asking me. I was like, no. Can I get some multiple
No,
choice?
no one knows. Only the Seventh-day Adventists know. But I mean, you got to remember, right? Like, they are Seventh-day Adventist. And this is like, side note, they're a particular brand of Christianity. They're their very own denomination. And some actually go as far as to label them like almost like a cult.
Okay.
Like they're their own thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the first inquiry ran from December of 1980 into January of 1981. The courtroom was filled with journalists. The entirety of Australia wanted to know what was going down in that courtroom.
Yeah.
The state laid out their case that the Chamberlains had something to do with whatever happened to Azaria. And even though Lindy was questioned on the stand by the state prosecutor, they ultimately failed in painting the picture of Lindy as a mother with motive to harm her own baby.
Yeah.
The judge ruled on live TV as the news cameras rolled that Azaria, quote, met her death when attacked by a wild dingo whilst asleep in her family's tent.
Good.
Neither of her parents were, he found, quote, in any degree whatsoever responsible for her death. Still, the number of oddities concerning Azaria's clothing convinced the judge that, quote, the body of Azaria was taken from the possession of the dingo and disposed of by an unknown method by a person or persons name unknown.
What?
Yeah. So then in September of 1981, so this is like 9 months later, right? Because this ended in January of 81. So 9 months later, in September of 81, Northern Territory, which is the territory where Uluru is, which is a state. Northern Territory is the name of the state.
Mm-hmm.
Police officers from Northern Territory conducted a 4.5-hour search of the Chamberlains' home, seizing over 300 items, ranging from clothing to scissors to the yellow Torana that they had driven to Uluru.
Okay. I don't know Australian law, but they've already been acquitted and now there's a search warrant being.
Yep.
Okay. Okay.
Well, because it was an inquiry,
I see.
not a trial.
Just a looky-loo.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I think I talk about this later, but I think part of the reason why they're able to do that is because initially the cause of death on her death certificate was open
Okay.
or something. Some whatever term they use for like unknown.
Yeah. Okay.
Which means that technically they're able to still investigate it, I think.
Yeah, okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So they take the car, they take 300 items, including clothes and scissors. Detective Charwood revealed to Lindy that the search had been prompted in part by the findings of British forensic expert James Cameron, not that James Cameron, a different guy, who concluded from examining the baby's clothes that no dingo had been involved in her disappearance. Lindy responded, "I didn't know there were any dingo experts in London."
Good for you, Lindy. No shit.
Right?
Yeah.
So by November of 1981, so a couple months later, an attorney general for the Northern Territory filed a motion to quash the findings from the first inquest using newly found evidence from the now completely dismantled family vehicle that they had seized, claiming that there was the presence of a large quantity of blood inside the car.
Okay.
So in December of 1981, a year after the start of the first inquest, the second inquest began.
Jeez.
Despite the lack of a body, the lack of a motive, and the lack of any eyewitnesses.
Mm-hmm.
This time, the state laid out a case for Lindy murdering Azaria the evening of the 17th in the family car with a sharp object, probably scissors, supposedly supported by the evidence of the blood found there after they dismantled it to search it. A biologist testified that she had found fetal blood beneath the passenger seat.
What?
Our expert on dingoes, James Cameron, claimed in his testimony that the tear found on Azaria's jumpsuit could hardly have come from a dingo. Quote, it's more consistent with scissors.
Uh-huh.
The coroner who performed the second inquest and recorded the findings as to the cause and manner of Azaria's death stated that although the evidence was to a large degree circumstantial, a properly instructed jury could arrive at a verdict with regard to the clothing evidence. He put forth that the Chamberlains knew dingoes were in the area, attempted to simulate a dingo attack, recovered Azaria's buried body, removed her clothing, damaged the clothing by cutting, rubbed the clothing in vegetation, and deposited the clothing for later recovery.
I have no words. That's this. First off, what's the coroner coronering? There's no body. What's he doing?
I don't know. Look, I don't understand Australia law. I don't even understand half the titles they use. I actually just imposed like U.S. titles on things like judge and shit because I don't understand.
Is
what's
this a
going
baby
on down
coroner? It sounds like a baby coroner findings.
Maybe.
God.
Maybe. How are you coroning anything? There's no body.
Yeah.
Yeah, what
No
are we
body.
cornering here? There's no body here. There's no body. So Sally Lowe, right, the one of the two, the woman in the couple that they had befriended that night, right? Although she was called to testify by the state, which would imply that she is testifying on behalf of the state. Her testimony is supportive of the state's claims, right? She said Lindy was only away from the barbecue 6 to 10 minutes, a very short period in which to have committed the murder and temporarily disposed of the body. She also said, quote, I heard the baby cry, quite a serious cry, shortly before Lindy went to the tent and reportedly saw the dingo slinking off into the dark. On cross-examination, Sally confirmed that she was positive she heard a baby cry, a cry that was suddenly cut off, and that the cry definitely came from the tent. She also described Lindy before the incident having, quote, a new mum glow about her.
Oh, God.
Testimony from others who were at the campground that August night generally presented a version of events that also seemed to aid the defense more than the prosecution, even though it was the prosecution that had called them to testify.
God.
Sally's husband, Greg, was asked on cross-examination whether he saw the Chamberlains cleaning blood from their car at the time when they would have had to have done so, according to the prosecution's timeline. And Greg was like, no, I didn't. There was quite a lot of people around at that time at the tent site. And I'm sure if anything like that happened, it would have been noticed.
No shit.
Judy West testified she heard Lindy cry, the dingoes got my baby, just 5 to 10 minutes after she heard a dingo growl low and deep outside the tent.
God.
She also testified that earlier she had been forced to shoo off a dingo that had grabbed her 12-year-old daughter by the arm and pulled.
Oh my God. This does not sound like a fun place to camp.
No!
Totally out of control.
Right?
Yikes.
This is one of those things where it's like humans intruding in spaces they shouldn't be. Right?
Yeah.
In fact, when I was talking to my friend Amy about this, she was like, and I always point to this story as like, and this is why you don't fuck around with sacred native sites. Just don't go there.
No kidding.
It's not for you. Witness Amy Whitaker, however, provided jurors with evidence of the seemingly odd behavior that had turned public opinion against the Chamberlains earlier in the investigation. Amy Whitaker testified that minutes after the alleged dingo attack, Michael Chamberlain had appeared at the doorway of her camper and announced, a dingo has taken our baby and she is probably dead by now.
Yeah, this Michael guy has got some weird things going on.
Yes. She also reported Lindy saying, as she tried to comfort her, whatever happens, it is God's will.
Oh, well, that's because of their sort of unusual religious beliefs.
They're very in it. Her husband is a pastor. Her dad was a pastor. She was raised in this church. She's married to this church. You know what I mean? Like, these are very religiously convicted people.
Yeah.
She also described Lindy and Michael walking alone together into the bush for 15 to 20 minutes, a time during which the prosecution later argued the Chamberlains might have buried their baby.
Sure.
Or they were probably going out to like pray together. That was my first thought. right?
No kidding. And also, like, 300 people are searching. Nobody would have seen, like, freshly overturned dirt.
Right. And they have 2 other kids to think
Yeah.
of. Young kids.
Mhm.
They're not, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Hmm.
A reporter from Sydney offered a concise comparison between the 2 inquiries, the first and the second. The first inquest was about dingoes. This one is about blood.
Mhm.
The blood evidence persuaded the judge. He charged Lindy Chamberlain with murder and Michael as being an accessory after the fact. The inquest concluded in February of 1982, and the indictment came down in September that same year. On October 29th, 1982, Lindy and Michael were both found guilty as charged. Lindy received a life sentence without parole, and Michael received a 3-year suspended sentence.
Oh my God. That's awful.
During the second inquest, indictment, and sentencing that year, Lindy was pregnant with her and Michael's 4th child. And shortly after her conviction, Lindy was escorted under guard to give birth to Kalia in November of 1982.
Mm.
Lindy began the long and arduous appeal process. Her first 2 appeals were rejected. But new reports casting doubt on the prosecution's scientific evidence helped spur a growing Free Lindy movement.
Good.
Most damning of all the new reports was one showing that what the prosecution had claimed was the blood of a murdered child in the Chamberlain vehicle was in fact not even blood at all. It was paint emulsion. Well over 100,000 Australians signed petitions calling for her release. The country remained, however, deeply divided on the issue, with one poll showing 52% of the nation's residents believed her guilty of murder.
Wow.
An English hiker named David Brett would unintentionally succeed in gaining Lindy's release. He did so in January 1986 by falling off Uluru during an evening climb and killing himself. Side note, as of 2019, because of the sacredness of Uluru, it has been successfully made illegal to climb there any
that's
longer.
Good.
8 days after his accident, his body was discovered below the bluff where he had lost his footing in an area full of dingo lairs.
Ooh.
As police scoured the area looking for missing bones that might have been carried off by dingoes, they discovered a once white jacket of a baby, Azaria's missing matinee jacket.
Fuck.
The jacket that didn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
5 days after the discovery, on February 7th, 1986, Lindy was released from prison and her life sentence was remitted.
5 days after the discovery? Wow.
Yeah, they do things different in other places when you have proof of innocence.
Oh, yeah.
Or at least proof that there's reasonable doubt.
Yeah, that's good.
In 1987, a royal commission began investigating the matter further. The purpose of the royal commission was to inquire into and report on the correctness of the Chamberlain convictions. In reaching the conclusion that there was a reasonable doubt as to the Chamberlain's guilt, the commission concluded that the hypothesis that Lindy murdered Azaria had not been proven beyond reasonable doubt. Although the commission was of the opinion that the evidence afforded considerable support for the dingo hypothesis, it did not examine the evidence to see whether it had been proved that a dingo took the baby. To do so would involve a, quote, fundamental error of reversing the onus of proof and requiring Mrs. Chamberlain to prove her innocence.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, we don't have to prove that a dingo took the baby. We just have to show that there's enough reasonable doubt that she didn't murder her own baby to not convict her of murdering her own baby.
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
So in 1988, the Supreme Court found that the alleged baby blood found in the family car, which was the crux of the prosecution's case, could have been any substance, but was likely that of a sound deadening compound from a manufacturing overspray, a finding which underscored inconsistencies in the earlier blood testing. Like, that's so, how do they got it so wrong.
So wrong. Yeah.
So wrong. Add to that the discovery of the missing matinee jacket next to a dingo lair.
Mm-hmm.
And all of this led to the Supreme Court acquitting Lindy and Michael.
Good.
Lindy and Azaria's story was made most famous by the film Evil Angels, released outside of Australia and New Zealand as A Cry in the Dark, with Lindy being portrayed by Meryl Streep, which earned her an Oscar nomination. Lindy would go on to write an autobiography about her life and her ordeal, which was published in 1990, titled Through My Eyes. In 1991, Michael and Lindy divorced, and while on a speaking tour in the U.S., Lindy would meet her second husband, Rick Creighton, an American publisher and fellow member of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. They actually lived in Seattle for a few years until moving together to Australia in 1998.
Wow.
In August of 2010, on the 30th anniversary of the death of Azaria, Lindy appealed on her website to have the cause of death amended on Azaria's death record, which was still listed as open. In February of 2012, a fourth inquest is held into the death of Azaria, and in June of 2012, the court concludes that a dingo did indeed kill Azaria. New evidence concerning dingo attacks on humans, including 3 fatal attacks on children since the third inquest, played a heavy role in this conclusion. The court stated, quote, "The evidence is sufficiently adequate, clear, cogent, and exact to exclude all other reasonable probabilities than that a dingo entered the tent where Lindy and Michael Chamberlain's young child lay resting on that August night 32 years earlier."
Wow.
Lindy Chamberlain-Creighton stated the obvious when she said, quote, "This battle to get the legal truth about what caused Azaria's death has taken too long."
Yeah.
And that is the story of Lindy Chamberlain-Creighton,
Shit.
whose 9-week-old baby was taken from her and eaten by dingoes.
That's so awful. That poor baby.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God. Wow.
Right?
Wow. Thank you for that.
That was a roller coaster,
That
right?
really was. That really was.
Mm-hmm.
That poor woman. God.
I cannot even imagine like the insult to injury of like your baby is stolen by a wild animal.
Mhm.
A 9-week-old baby stolen and killed by a wild animal. And then you spend the next like however many years of your life literally fighting for your life.
Mhm.
Because half the country you live in thinks you murdered your baby.
Yeah.
What?
Oh, God. I hope that fucking mouth bucket carrying detective feels like an idiot. Seriously. Fuck that guy.
Right?
Yeah.
It's so wild to me too, because remember the story about the gal that you told me that had the baby and then it was stillborn in the bathroom and she buried it in the backyard.
Mhm.
And,
Yeah.
and it's like, did you just want to be famous for solving some horrible murder? Like you just couldn't accept that
Yeah. This is what happened. Yeah.
everyone around is saying like dingoes are everywhere. We saw them. They already attacked the kids here. Like we tracked them. We had all this evidence. We had all this evidence that a dingo came into the tent and took this baby. Why? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. What yeah, because
because you want to be like a famous detective that gets that.
yeah,
Why are we making it?
yeah, and
But then when actual murders happen, it's like, oh, it's a suicide. It's fine. And they leave. They don't investigate. You know what I mean?
I do.
What are we doing?
I don't know. And the alternative theories that they were proposing were so preposterous. It's like, it's way more likely that it was an animal than whatever crazy shit you're saying.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
God.
Anyway,
Everything.
we did it,
Thank
sister.
you.
We made it through.
We did.
We made it through. No, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Thank you, Chaos Kids. Thank you, Chaos Kids Club members. And if you aren't one, we'd love it if you became one. It's $5 a month. You go to patreon.com/crime, wine, and chaos. You get a bonus episode every month that only the Chaos Kids Club members get. And you get new episodes drop a day early over there for the club members. And, you know, we get a few more Patreons and we'll have another virtual wine night.
yeah,
We'll get to hang out, chit chat.
Chatty. Yeah.
Yeah.
Give us a review, preferably on Apple Podcast, if that's your listening platform. Go ahead.
Because you could do a typey one there. You can like actually type a thing up for us.
Yeah, do it.
We would love that. We love that.
Mm-hmm.
Holy shit, sister.
Yeah.
That was
That was
chaotic.
so chaotic.
I love you.
Love
bye.
you. Bye. Wine, and Chaos is produced by 8th Direction Records. Artwork by Joshua M. Davis. Music by Paul Abner. If you would like to support the show, you can visit our Patreon page at crimewineandchaos.com/Patreon. Cheers.
No, leave it in. She needs to know.
Oh.
She needs to know.
Okay.
Uluru, Uluru, Uluru.